Hello everyone, my name is Masha Nuts, and today I'm going to talk a little bit more about triangle ends, including how to start triangle ends after a loop. So I already made a video on triangle ends about a year ago, and I really suggest that you watch that one first before going into this one, because that one really goes over all of the basics and teaches you how to make triangle ends pretty much from scratch. This one is more of an extension to that one. It goes into more detail and teaches you more on triangle ends. That being said, let's get into it. So the most common question that I get is, what do you do if you have an odd number of strings? And I think that question stems from the fact that I used an even number of strings, and in the example that I used, I started from the center going out. But in reality, it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter what number of strings you have. It doesn't even have to be one triangle. Let's take a look at this pattern, for example. The triangle ends technique is also widely called the shaped start technique. And that is because it doesn't have to be one triangle, it could be multiple. So looking at this pattern, we do have a pretty clear triangle in the pattern. If we start from the top of the rainbow, where the red color is, and cut all the way to the edges, we could just start making our triangle end from that point. And that would be exactly what I demonstrated in the first video. However, we do have other options. We could do what I actually did, and instead of starting from the rainbow, going in one big triangle, we can separate the pattern into two smaller triangles and start from the checkered part of the pattern, drawing two triangles from the black dots. I personally preferred this in this specific pattern. I made a loop and then I did two triangle ends going off from each side of the loop. Now I will be demonstrating how to do this a little bit later in the video, but first I want to cover this theoretically and show you different ways in which you can cut your pattern. A question that I get a lot as well is, where do you cut your pattern? People seem to think that there is a correct answer, but in fact it is entirely down to personal preference and how you want your pattern to look. I already demonstrated two different ways you can cut this pattern, but you can start wherever you want. Of course, starting in places that makes sense for the pattern would look more aesthetically pleasing, and by that I mean starting at a place where the pattern naturally forms a triangle, such as with the rainbow or with the checkered part. But if you want to, you could start somewhere right in the middle of the black part of the pattern and just cut from there. It really doesn't matter, it's entirely up to personal preference. So let's look at a different example. This pattern, for example. There are so many different ways you can start this pattern. Now, as I mentioned previously, to make a bracelet look more aesthetically pleasing, it is best to do the shaped start of your bracelet in a way that complements the pattern. So if a pattern naturally has some sort of triangle in it, it would be best to start there for the shaped start. But even saying that, there are multiple ways you can go about doing that. So for this pattern, for example, in this pattern you have individual crosses. When I made this pattern, I wanted the cross to be the first thing to appear on the bracelet, and I wanted it to appear from the start. I didn't want it to start from the middle. So I started looking at the dividers between the two crosses, and you can see that we have these diamonds in there. So I decided I wanted to make a loop, and I cut the bracelet into two separate triangles. Starting from the top of the two outermost diamonds, I cut the left part into a triangle and the right part into the exact same triangle. And that is exactly how I started my bracelet. However, as I said, there are multiple options. You could decide you want to do two loops instead and cut your triangles into four, following the exact shape of the cross. So at each point of the outline that follows the movements of the cross. But then again, if you don't care about the shape start complementing the pattern, you can start literally anywhere. Choose the center of the cross and draw a triangle outwards. Choose a dot and draw a triangle from there. Choose 2 points. Anywhere in the pattern, draw two triangles. It doesn't even have to be symmetrical. So let's talk more about that. Going back to the question of what to do when you don't have an even number of strings. Check out this pattern, for example. With 11 strings in the pattern, there isn't exactly a center to start from. And that's okay. Your triangle doesn't have to be symmetrical. You can start at literally any point and just cut your pattern how you want. Of course, that means one side of the triangle will be a little bit longer than the other. However, even in this situation, there still is a pretty clear point that you could cut your pattern to complement the pattern with the shape of the start. Going right at the top of where the wave starts and cutting from there will result in a little bit of a lopsided triangle, since the right side is one knot longer. but it still complements the shape of the pattern. And as you start knotting, the pattern is going to go into the wave. But what if we have a pattern where there are no clear triangles, such as this pattern? There are no outlines, no clear triangles, no real indication of where to start. Again, as I said, it doesn't matter. Start anywhere. You can start in the center and draw your own triangle. You can start from the side and even make it a half triangle if you want. You can even do a teardrop loop going from any point, and that essentially is an inverted triangle end if you really think about it. But that is a whole separate video and will be linked. I won't be discussing that here. How to do your triangle end is entirely up to you. But okay, you might be really confused right now, so let's get into actually doing something. So I've been wanting to remake this pattern for a while, and I think this is the perfect chance to do that. Let me explain my reasoning for how I position my triangle ends for this pattern. I like to have my shaped starts and ends complementing the pattern. Of course, this isn't always possible, as I showed you in other cases. Sometimes there aren't shapes to complement in a pattern. There aren't triangles, there aren't diamonds, there isn't anything like that. That is a completely different situation, makes it a little bit more difficult, and depends entirely on you how you want to cut it. In this pattern, there is a shape that can be complemented with a nice triangle end. So when I have a shape that repeats itself throughout a pattern, similarly to how we had the cross in a previous example, I like to start my bracelet right as the shape starts. So that makes me look into the divider between the two shapes in the pattern. And here you can see that there is a diamond of white and two sort of gradient triangles on the edges, both of which are separated by a very clear outline. Now that is the outline that I'm going to be focusing on. And the outline itself already cuts the pattern in a perfect way. That is exactly how I want to cut my bracelet. So the first thing that I'm going to be knotting once I do start knotting will be the outline, which is then going to go into the actual shape. And let's also talk about triangle ends, as in ends. We've so far just been talking about how to start it. That's because the techniques are pretty much the same. You can also finish your bracelet however you like. You can cut it from any point to any point exactly how you would do for the start. But here, since the pattern is symmetrical, I am literally going to cut it exactly the same as I did for the start. So once I start the bracelet, not a couple of these shapes, I think I'm going to do 4, I'm going to finish the bracelet by doing 2 triangle ends on the other side in the exact same place, following the shape of the outline. So I'm gonna go cut my strings, do my loop, and I'll be right back with you. So I've cut all my strings and I've done a basic loop, which I have a tutorial on separately. And now I'm gonna go into doing a triangle end on the left side. So I showed you previously how I decided to cut my pattern. So we're going to be doing this triangle end in the exact same way that we did in the original video. Looking at this left triangle here, we're going to take out the strings that we need for the left side and the strings that we need for the right side. So for the right side, we need 1 dark blue string and then 6 white strings. So 1 dark blue string, 6 white strings, and then you see another dark blue string coming in, but that is from the other triangle end, so we don't need to take it out here. That's going to come out from the other side. So all the other colors are going to go on the left side. So now we're just going to go into doing a triangle end. So judging by our pattern on the right side, the first color that we're going to need is the dark blue. So I'm going to do a forward backward knot onto the entire strand of string with the dark blue. And then on the right side, all of the strings are white, so it doesn't matter in which order we take them out. We just need to keep taking 1 string out of the bunch, doing a forward backward knot onto the bunch, and then taking the next string and doing the same thing. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to go onto the left side. So there we go, the right half is done. And then on the left half, we're going to be bringing out the strings one by one in the order of the gradient. So the first string we're going to be bringing out is the dark blue. Next up, we've got the slightly lighter blue, which is next in the gradient. Then the third blue. Fourth blue, and finally the 5th blue, which is the lightest blue. Then we head in with the white. And then we do the gradient once again, but this time in reverse. So we start from the lightest color and go to the darkest color. And there we go, the triangle end for the first half is complete. And you can see that one of the sides is longer than the other, and that's fine. All right, so let me do the same thing for the other side, and then I'll get back to you. And there you go, I've completed both triangle ends. Now all that's left to do is connect them and start actually knotting the bracelet. To connect them, you do the same thing that you would do in a teardrop loop, and you just make a knot between these two strings. However, I like to start knotting the bracelet first so I can connect the two parts and then knot right over the connection to secure it. So I'm going to do that. In terms of what you need to knot, how to follow the pattern, you need to knot the parts that are inside the triangle. So for me, that's anything under the outline, but also including the outline itself. I prefer to do this using segment knotting because that's just generally much easier, but you can also do this with the row by row method. You just have to exclude the knots that are outside of the triangle. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I have a very detailed video on both segment knotting and the row by row method. But as for me, I'm just gonna go and do the outline. This is the point that I was talking about. So I am in the point in the pattern where I need to connect the two dark blue threads. But first I need to connect the two white threads. So I'm gonna do that, and then straight after I connect them, I'm gonna go over that connection with the two dark blue threads. And by doing that and straight away going over the connection, I really secure it to make sure that it doesn't come apart. So that's it, I'm ready to continue this bracelet now. And that's all I have for you today. I hope this cleared up some confusion you may have had regarding triangle ends, and hopefully you now understand how to make them after a loop. If you have any more questions or other topics that you want me to talk about, feel free to leave that down in the comments. Thank you for watching, I hope this video was useful to you. I post videos on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I will see you next time. Bye!